Have you ever wondered what lies beyond that final heartbeat? Imagine waking up in a vast marble hall where towering doorways lead to galaxies and secret tunnels open onto glowing gardens. That was Senior Airman Chase Donovan's reality after a routine moped crash left him clinically dead. On the brink of eternity, he stood beside unseen guides who whispered the mysteries of life and death. He watched counselors help newly arrived souls remember their purpose, witnessed children stepping straight into bliss without instruction, and felt a powerful presence declare that there is no death. In just minutes, he saw the panorama of every life ever lived and felt a love so profound it reshaped his very being. Stay with me, because what Chase discovered in those fleeting moments will challenge everything you think you know about the soul's journey and might even change the way you live every single day. What would you ask if you met eternity face to face? Share your thoughts below before we dive in. I remember that afternoon as if it were yesterday. I was at my parents' house, carefree and speeding down our quiet suburban street on one of their old mopeds. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the pavement, when I leaned into a tight turn and spotted a terrified squirrel frozen in the middle of the road. My heart slammed against my ribs as instinct took over. I jerked the handlebars hard to the right, tires screeching against cracked asphalt, desperate to spare the little creature's life. Instead, I barreled into a towering oak, the impact jarring every bone in my body. I skidded across the grass in a spray of dirt and leaves, my right hand searing with pain as I crumpled to the ground. Doctors later told me I'd torn the tendons in that hand clean from the bone, and I needed surgery to stitch them back in place. Never in my life had I faced an operating table before, and as the anesthetic drip slid into my vein, I felt its icy trail climb up my arm, pool in my shoulder, surge through my neck, and flood my chest. In that single breath, my world went dark until it didn't. My eyes shot open to a sight more magnificent than any cathedral. Walls of gleaming marble stretching into infinity, their pale surface carved into graceful arches that looked as timeless as starlight. To my left, rows of ornate doorways yawned like silent portals. To my right, long tables with polished benches invited unseen travelers to sit and be guided. A calm voice whispered in my left ear, though I saw no one. He told me this was the Orientation Center, a place of passage for souls newly freed from flesh. In that moment, I felt neither fear nor confusion, only a profound awe, as if I'd stepped into the pages of Revelation 21:18, and discovered heaven's true vestibule. And I knew, with every fiber of my being, that the journey I was about to take would change me forever. I had no notion that I'd slip beyond life's fragile veil, or that the brief sting in my chest was something far more profound than a mere allergic shock. I was enraptured by the marble expanse around me, and barely registered the gentle urging of the unseen guide at my left side. He simply said, "Walk with me," and as I moved, I noticed row after row of polished doorways hewn into the pristine walls like grand portals leading into other worlds. At each portal stood two attendants at a heavy stone table, 4 benches radiating around it as if inviting souls to pause and share their stories. My guide directed me toward the first opening. I stepped closer and peered through and gasped. There before me lay a tunnel of endless starlight. I saw pinpoints of brilliant galaxies swirling against the darkness, nebulae unfurling in luminous plumes of violet and gold, planets rotating in silent majesty. It felt reminiscent of the Apostle Paul's vision of heaven's third layer, where he heard things no human could utter. 2 Corinthians 12:4. My heart trembled with awe. Then my guide spoke again. "Look up to your left and watch." I obeyed, gazing at the next portal just as an elderly gentleman staggered through. His hand clutched his chest, his face pinched with confusion. My guide quietly told me he had suffered a sudden heart attack moments ago. A counselor in flowing blue robes rose from her table, crossed the aisle, and reached out to steady him. She took his trembling hands in hers and guided him gently to a seat opposite her. Though I stood too far to catch every whispered word, I watched as his lined, weary face softened and began to glow with renewed youth. With each sentence she spoke, his posture straightened, his gray hair darkened, and his wrinkles smoothed until the man sitting there looked more like a vigorous 20-something with hope shining in his eyes. My guide explained that her role was to remind each arriving soul that the life they just lived had purpose, and that here not in earthly years was their true home, whether they named it heaven or the other side. When her gentle counsel concluded, the man rose from the bench with a serene smile. He stepped to the right edge of the hall and descended 3 broad marble steps into a lush garden that seemed to pulse with life. I've read descriptions of celestial gardens in Revelation, of trees bearing every kind of fruit, of rivers of crystal water, Revelation 22:1-2, but nothing prepared me for this vibrant oasis. The flowers exhaled, colors our eyes on earth cannot name. The air thrummed with warmth and welcome. And there they were, dozens of loved ones, friends, and family members who had preceded him into eternity waiting to celebrate his homecoming. They rushed forward with open arms, embracing him with tears of joy, rapture, and relief. I watched them laugh and weep as they cried out, "Congratulations and welcome home, you did so well." Their voices intertwined like a hymn of gratitude and reunion. It was as if each embrace wove the final thread in a tapestry of love that death could never unravel. In that moment, I understood that passage through those tunnels was not an end, but a triumphant return to the heart of all things. When I emerged from that garden of reunion, I felt an overwhelming serenity settle into my bones. My unseen guide whispered, "Sometimes souls come back so fresh from the other side that they need no orientation. They remember every petal, every heartbeat, every laughter they ever knew." Young children, for instance, slip through those tunnels like returning guests who never left. They laugh and play without a word of explanation. Orientation is reserved for those of us whose lives stretched across many decades until memory grew dim and purpose felt lost. As we turned back toward the marble corridor, I watched counselors rise from their tables time and again. Each would glide toward a newly arrived soul, offering a gentle hand, guiding them back to the benches for quiet conversation. I longed to capture every detail, the way their robes shimmered, like the robes of angels described in Revelation, or the compassionate care echoing Jesus tending the sick, Matthew 14:14. Yet, there were far too many arrivals to count. Souls drifted through those tunnels like a living river flowing toward home. Soon we arrived at another grand structure directly beneath the Greco-Roman hall. Out front, a perfect circle of white columns held up a gleaming dome that reminded me of the Pantheon in Rome, yet transcended earthly grandeur. We passed beneath the colonnade and entered into a hushed chamber where all destiny was woven. My guide explained, "This is the library of lifetimes where every soul collaborates with its divine mentors to map out the next journey. Life is never random, it is threaded with meaning." In the center of the chamber stood a long oaken table bearing 2 ancient scrolls. One was bound with a ribbon of sapphire blue, the color of eternity. The other's ribbon glowed crimson like sacrificial love. He said, "These are your scrolls of purpose. Your soul inscribes the major milestones, the family you will cherish, the talents you will develop, the challenges that will forge your spirit." It called to mind Jeremiah's promise that before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I set you apart, Jeremiah 1-5. I felt a shiver of wonder at the idea that every twist and trial I thought accidental had been chosen with care. I almost reached out to unroll the blue scroll, but my guide gently shook his head. "Not yet," he murmured. "You must live the life before you can read the plan." In that moment, I understood that our greatest test is not discovering our purpose, but having the courage to walk it step by step back in the world of the living. When the guide led me out to a gentle meadow nestled between rolling emerald hills, I felt as though I had stepped into a living tapestry of creation itself. The air was sweet with the scent of new grass and wildflowers, and in the distance the soft bleat of unseen creatures mingled with the song of birds. Then, one by one, animals appeared first, a pair of foxes weaving through the tall grass, then a herd of deer whose coats gleamed like burnished bronze in the light, and finally rabbits, squirrels, even birds of brilliant plumage whose species I had never encountered on Earth. My guide's voice drifted beside me as he said, "Every creature you have ever loved, and every creature anyone has ever loved, thrives here on the other side." I nodded, astonished, as two golden retrievers, my childhood companions, bounded joyfully toward me, ears flapping and tails wagging. A tingle of recognition shot through my chest, those loyal eyes that had welcomed me home after every scraped knee and stormy day. Beside them raced two tabby cats I had rescued years ago. They chased one another in circles, their soft mews of delight echoing like laughter. It felt like a reunion promised in Scripture when God set the animals of the field to rejoice. Psalm 96-12. As more animals flooded the meadow, horses, birds, even an energetic flock of chickens, I realized every boundary that separated species on Earth had dissolved here. They played together without fear or hesitation, as though united by a love that transcended earthly distinctions. It reminded me of Isaiah's vision of peace, where the wolf lies down with the lamb, Isaiah 11-6, each heart at rest in harmony. Then, with a gentle gesture, my guide beckoned me closer to the stream that wound through the meadow. Crystal waters rippled over smooth stones, reflecting a riot of color from the flowers above. He smiled and said, "Just as these creatures wait in joy for those they knew on Earth, so does the world of the Spirit welcome every soul with open arms. There is no loneliness here, only reunion and unending affection." In that moment, I felt the purest warmth, as if the love of every pet I had ever known leapt into my own heart, binding me to a truth I had once taken for granted, that love never dies. It simply finds a new home. As I stood amidst the gentle sway of golden grass, my guide simply nodded toward a figure who appeared as if stepping through a veil of light. He approached with an aura so radiant that I could not discern his facial features, only the pure whiteness of his robe, cinched by a crimson sash that seemed aflame with purpose. He paused just 2 paces before me, lifted both hands in a gesture of benediction, and spoke with a voice that resonated deeper than any echo. "You must tell them there is no death." The words hung in the air like a promise. In that instant, the world of marble halls, orientation tables, and living meadows dissolved, and I felt a gentle pulling sensation beneath my chest. A pulse of warmth flooded my body, and suddenly, I was back in a sterile hospital room, tubes snaking from my arms, doctors clustered at my bedside. One of them broke into a shout. "He's back! He's back!" My heart thundered as I realized that though I had lain flat and cold mere moments ago, I had truly straddled the line between life and whatever waits beyond. They said my body had been still for 6 minutes, 360 seconds of clinical death. Yet during that brief span, my consciousness had traversed realms of infinite depth, and I had received wisdom that no measure of time on earth could contain. It reminded me of Elijah's encounter on Mount Horeb, where in the whispering silence he found God not in the wind or earthquake, but in the still, small voice. 1 Kings 19:12. Likewise, in a breath I was carried from the brink of oblivion into the heart of a divine mystery. To this day, I carry his parting charge like a living ember within me. How could a fleeting heartbeat in the physical realm encompass what felt like hours of revelation? Perhaps time, as we know it, is but a shadow cast by eternity. As St. Paul wrote, "For in a flash, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, the mortal is clothed in immortality." 1 Corinthians 15:52. I share this not to astonish, but to awaken a reminder that death is not an end, but the threshold of a grander existence. If you long to hear more of the vast library of souls, of past lives laid bare and lessons rediscovered, click here for the full unedited interview. Let those words stir your heart and beckon you to embrace life with the courage that comes from knowing there is indeed no death.